So now that we've talked about the executor interface, looked at how it works, talked about some of the methods, or the method is just one, let's go ahead and talk about how to fix some of the limitations with the executor via the executor service. And we'll see that this is a much more powerful mechanism than the plain old executor interface. First and foremost, executor service is an interface that extends executor, so you get the executor capabilities from executor in executor service, but quite frankly, that's probably not useful unless you're just doing sort of one-way operations where you also want to be able to shut down the executor service itself. That's kind of the only way it's really useful to use execute. There's other much more powerful, cooler methods available in executor service that we will talk about. Some of the methods that are in the executor service allow you to submit either callables or runnables and get back something called a future. We'll talk a lot more about a future shortly. Futures are basically proxies that allow clients, people using the executor service, to manage the life cycle of tasks that they submit for execution asynchronously. And we'll see that there are ways of submitting individual tasks, and there's also ways of running a bunch of tasks, either all of them to compute all the results or whichever one comes back first. There's also a bunch of methods that manage the life cycle of the executor service itself, plus by extension the tasks that are running in the executor service. And these are ways of being able to shut down the executor service either gracefully or abruptly, and then also to check whether or not things are shut down and wait for the whole thing to be shut down. Just a quick recap. What is a task? A task is a unit of computation that ideally doesn't depend on the state, result, or side effects of other tasks that may be running in parallel. Again, think doing your laundry as an example. There are 4 phases in the life cycle of a task. First is the created phase, where you make a new task. That's typically by making a new callable or runnable instance or passing in a lambda expression that embodies those signatures. The second is to submit the task, and you do that by calling one of the methods on the executor service, like submit, and that gives the task to the executor service to run. And as we've talked about before, it'll start running it at some point as soon as it's given to a thread or a thread's created to make it work. The next thing is starting the task, and that's when the task is actually taken out of whatever queue it's in, and its call method or run method is invoked. So that's where you start to do the real work in a background thread. And then finally, completed says a task is finished, and it either finished successfully or it finished unsuccessfully, in which case an exception will be thrown, or you canceled it, depending on how you submit it. If it's a two-way task, you can easily cancel it. If it's a one-way task, you can cancel it if you submit it as opposed to execute it. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail as we go through the APIs. So that was just a quick overview of what the executor service does. The next couple lessons will go into much more detail about the methods and the behavior and structure and functionality of the executor service.